Hi, everybody. Thank you and welcome. Thank you for joining us, and also happy National Caregivers Month. I'm Amanda Dyer, the co-director and producer of the documentary film Unseen: How We're Failing Parent Caregivers and Why It Matters. The film, if you haven't seen it, it's about exploring the challenges faced by many parents who are caring for children or adults with disabilities or complex medical needs. And I am joined by Jess Ronne, who you may recognize from the film. She's an author, speaker, nonprofit founder. What else do you want to add to your credentials?
What else do I do?
Yeah.
Author, speaker, nonprofit founder, associate
Podcaster,
producer of the Unseen documentary, and again, this new one. So I
Mhm.
think that about covers it at this point.
Mother of eight.
Yeah.
That's a that's a pretty good one.
Bread baker. I've been baking bread every day.
Oh wow,
I know, trying to
interesting.
get back to simplicity and the
Yeah,
things
this
that really matter.
the calming routines.
Yes, the calming
Awesome.
routine.
Well, I appreciate you taking time to chat. We are now celebrating our third National Family Caregivers Month since the film was released, which is hard to believe. But we have so many things coming up that we wanted to gather everyone together and just share all the details and give you all the nitty-gritty behind the scenes, answer any questions you have. So on that note, if you do have any questions, there's a Q&A box that you can pop them in, and we'll try to get to them either throughout where they make sense or save some for the end as well. And feel free to use the chat if you want to connect with anybody or kind of give us your thoughts as we go along. Keep it interesting. So to kick off, I think it would make sense to do just a quick, like, where are they now about the Ronnie family? If you only watched the documentary either this year or maybe in a screening that was held recently, you may be wondering, what are they up to now? The film leaves off in 2020, which I know is a really difficult year for your family, Jess. Can you tell us a little bit about how things have changed, where you are now, with what's going on?
Yeah, did it leave off in 2020 or 2021? Because we were back in
Maybe
Michigan.
21. Okay, yeah, 21,
It
I
was
guess. The
21.
bulk of it was
We
2020, and then
moved.
we caught back up in 21.
Yeah, we had just moved back to Michigan. We were actually living in a double wide with six kids and Lucas, if you can imagine, while we built a house. And we moved into that house, I believe, in 2022. So that was a very challenging period of life, as you can imagine. And since moving into the house, I'm trying to get all my dates straight here. I believe it was it was 2022 when a home kind of fell into our laps, this big deserted home. And Ryan and I started talking about, maybe we could turn this into a residential home for Lucas. That was always our long-term plan, but it went a lot faster than we anticipated it. So we toured it. We saw the vision. Well, I toured it. I saw the vision, and I was sure that as soon as I brought my husband, he would like kill my vision immediately because he's kind of the dream killer when it comes to my great ideas. So we
Or
went
your sanity saver.
or my sanity saver. So we went and toured it, and he looked at me and he was like, "Yeah, this is Luke's home." And I said, "Are you serious? Like, you're on board with this?" Because he was going to have to basically not work for about 8 months in order to renovate this home to make it into a residential home for Luke and a couple of other young disabled individuals. And so we set out on that path, and we purchased it August 12, 2022, on Luke's birthday of all days. And then Ryan spent about the next year, maybe 14, 15 months actually, renovating it. And Lucas moved in February, this past February. So he's now been living there as of today, 9 months.
Oh,
And doing really, really well. I mean, you can imagine it's been a huge transition for our family, just in so many ways. He's transitioned beautifully. I think it was way more difficult for us as his caregivers, sort of floundering and asking ourselves, like, who are we and what is our purpose now? Like, my whole purpose in life was to care for this child, and I have been. And just trying to figure out what that looks like moving forward. And his siblings have adjusted really, really well. They're like in sports now and can do all the fun things that, kids can do growing up. And we have the ability to both attend their games now. That's such a huge blessing, whereas, one of us would have to stay home before. So ultimately, we're just in a period of processing, of grieving, of transitioning, of joy. This past weekend, I even looked at Ryan and I said, weekends are fun again, because prior to Lucas living at Hope Farm, weekends were like really stressful, because he required so much care. They weren't like fun and relaxing like so many other families perceive weekends to be. They were like super stressful because nobody had school and Lucas was screaming because Lucas was bored, and that would often result in behaviors and aggression. And so I think that kind of sums up where we are right now. Like, weekends
Mhm.
are fun.
Yeah, that's a pretty big transition. And you said Luke is has really blossomed in his new
Oh,
space.
absolutely. Just even in his skills and learning how to do things independently. He now has a 24/7 staff and they take shifts, so they have energy. Whereas, like, when it was just me for the most part, I mean, you're exhausted. And you don't necessarily have the energy to teach all those new skills and to follow through on, whatever it may be, to teach them to be more independent. And I can see that he wanted that. Like, he's so close to one worker in particular. Like, we kind of joke it's his best friend. And then just being able to get up and maneuver around the house, it's very accessible. And we're just seeing leaps and bounds, even with his vocabulary and expressing what he wants. And so that's been huge. And it's been just it's enabled me to be able to see, like, this was the right thing to do for him and for our family. And it's just gonna take some time, I think, for us all to land in a space of total acceptance, because it's a huge change for our family.
Mm. Yeah, and I hear often people saying like, they make the decision one way or another and then are always kind of questioning like, is this the right decision? Was that the right move? Um, and I think, Luke's his success and thriving is helping you feel confident in that decision,
Yeah.
sounds like.
And I mean, there have absolutely been challenges with opening our own group home. I'm not going to minimize that at
Yeah.
all. Nor am I necessarily going to go into it right now either. But there have absolutely been challenges where Ryan and I have looked at each other and have been like, it might have been easier just to care for Luke at home. But
Yeah.
that's not really true, because I mean, every parent wants that future solution for your loved one. And while we may still have that energy to care for him, it's not him living his best life, and it's not us living our best life. So to make that transition when he was still a young man, and not as he gets older and gets more cemented in his ways, there's still some flexibility there. I think it was the right time for him and for us.
Mhm. I know this could be a whole webinar series on its own, but a couple questions have come up about how you found the caregivers and how you kind of manage the home. I know, again, that's a long, super long answer, but can you give just like the quick version? And we actually do have a webinar we did last year where you talked a little bit more about this. We can share links to that as well, where we talked about that like DIY solution you all were working on with a little bit more of those details. But yeah, just the really top level to help
Yeah,
people
we
understand.
partner with a home health care agency, and they provide the care. And I do have a supporter group actually on my Facebook page called Bison Brigade, where I do webinars that address this. And I also offer consulting on my website, jess+ms.com. And I would love to consult with anybody and help you come up with a solution for your loved one. It's really tricky, and there's not really one size fits all. So once I have a better understanding of your situation, it's easier to speak into how we can go about and solve that for your loved one.
Yeah, I think what you've told us is there was way more red tape and things to figure out than maybe anticipated, and I
Yes.
think it's going to vary by every state. The laws and regulations look completely different, so it's definitely no easy one size fits all solution.
Yes.
All right. Do you want to tell us about one other new development, a book that you have been working on that's coming to the world
I,
soon?
yeah, I'm not working on it anymore,
Okay,
but
that you were working on.
that I was working on. Yes, Caregiving with Grit and Grace is going to be released December 3rd. And I was even just thinking about it as I was walking this morning because I walk every day. It's kind of my therapy. And I thought, this book was such a love letter, honestly, it was a love letter one from me to Luke because I was working on it as we were creating Hope Farm. So it was me journaling and grieving and processing for about those 15 months as Ryan's creating this home for Luke. I'm creating like this love letter for Luke. And I'm going to get choked up here because it's really fresh. Tom would be so proud of me if I would cry on this webinar.
Look how open you are.
Right. Um, and just processing like all my feelings come out in this book as we're making this huge monumental decision to move our son into a home of his own. And so it was kind of my love letter to him. And then I realized too, it was like God's love letter to me because as he's downloading these devotionals and this encouragement for me to share to caregivers, I felt like the Lord was almost speaking to my heart and saying, it's going to be okay. And I'm going to give Lucas a hope and a future, and I'm going to give you a hope and a future, and your family a hope and a future, and I will protect him. So, this book is probably the most vulnerable book I've ever written and probably the closest to my heart because it's finally a book written to my audience too. I've been writing to caregivers for years and I've never really specifically written a book for caregivers. So I'm really excited to release this into the world. It's called Caregiving with Grit and Grace, 100 Days of Hope and Encouragement. I'm just really excited to see what it does in the world and where it goes. And um, yeah, feel free to pre-order it if you're interested.
Yes, no, definitely pre-order it. Don't think about it, just do it. You'll be glad.
Yeah,
And
and I
tell
should
it,
say too, it's for like caregivers of in all capacities. Like it's
that's what I was
not just
gonna
for caregivers of children with disabilities. It's, if you care for a spouse with a terminal illness or an aging parent, or if there's a special needs teacher that cares for your child, or the bus driver, or the bus aide, or any caregiver in any capacity, I believe would get a lot out of this book.
Nicole had a really interesting question. She said, I never thought of myself as a caregiver. I thought of myself as a mom, but now my son is 16 and I feel like I'm transitioning to caregiver. What about you? When do you think you saw yourself as a caregiver?
Probably around the exact same time as he was transitioning and going through puberty and becoming a young man. I think that's a pretty natural progression where you start to see other parents prepare to release their children into the world and they're going off to college and graduating from high school, and it starts to set in your own heart like this is not going to be the reality for me or for my child. And I think that's where that shift occurred for me, where it was, yes, I'll always be Luke's mom, but I'm also his caregiver. Because like my older kids, yeah, I'm their mom, but I don't have to, care for them. And I really enjoy him now, even being at Hope Farm, because I'm just mom again. I'll always be a secondary caregiver in many capacities. I'm still on the phone a lot, dealing with insurance issues or incontinence issues or, IEP meetings. That's still me. But like the actual physical care doesn't rest on me anymore. So it's really enjoyable to see him now and just spend time with them and go to the mall or go to the park or watch a movie or that's been really fun.
Mhm. Yeah, you can really, and I hear that so often. And there's, I think, data that suggests too that so many caregivers don't actually see themselves as a caregiver. So, they're just a friend or a daughter or parent, whatever that looks like. And so, a lot of the messaging and resources that are designed for caregivers aren't even really reaching them because those people don't go out looking for caregiver resources because they're not thinking of themselves that
Mhm.
way.
Mhm.
So I think, whatever works for somebody is fine, but there are are more and more resources available for people in that caregiver role. So to encourage folks to embrace that if it opens up more possibilities, more networks, more resources and relationships there. Um, so you said that the book is for, or what's the format of the book? Is it like devotional style setup, or daily readings, sit down and read it one setting? How do you think is the best way to experience it?
Probably all of the above. It's a devotional slash daily readings. But as my husband's actually reading it for the first time, he's like, I
You
kind of
didn't
want
want
to
to read it
read.
before printing?
Well, we got our, box of author copies, but he's like, you kind of want to read the whole thing straight through, because you're like, what comes next? And I was like, well, I don't know if that's good or not good because they're supposed to be like daily readings. So we create it in such a way where understanding that caregivers have a limited amount of time. So there's, a short daily reading with a big truth attached. And you, I suppose, can continue to read and get through, all 100 days as quickly as you want, or you can take it slowly and savor it. And get what you can out of it. But
Mhm.
it's a devotional.
Awesome. And
No,
definitely coming from, oh, sorry, go ahead.
you don't have to read the other books first. This is a standalone book.
But you can read the other ones first. What are those
Yeah,
called?
right. Sunlight Burning at Midnight, Blended with Grit and Grace, and Lovin' with Grit and Grace. And if you happen to live in the West Michigan area, I'm having my in-person launch party tonight from 5 to 7. And everybody's welcome. It's an open house style. It's free. And if you'd like to join, pop something in the chat and I will send the address your way.
And we had a couple questions on how do you pre-order? How do you actually submit a pre-order?
Uh, it's on Amazon, Caregiving with Grit and Grace.
Awesome. And then it comes out on December
Third.
3rd, December 3rd.
Yep.
So just a little bit more waiting and then it will be delivered right to you.
Right.
Cool. Anything else you want to say about the book?
Well, if you come to the in-person launch party tonight, I have 200 copies, and when they're gone, they're gone. So you can get the book prior to December 3rd
Oh, okay.
if you want to travel to Wyoming, Michigan, and grab a copy.
Yeah. Okay. Sneak peek if you can get there.
Right.
Nicole asked, how long did it take to write the book?
About a year.
Is that pretty normal or was that different
I
from your
mean,
normal process?
you know how I'm wired. If there's a deadline, I'll get it done 6 months before the deadline.
You had it. So what did you have it done before the deadline?
Oh yeah.
Oh,
That's just how I'm wired.
yeah.
I don't have a procrastinating bone in my body. I just try to get things done.
Yeah. That's a real gift that you have.
Or I'm like still living in hypervigilance.
Well, there's downsides to every blessing, aren't
Right, right.
there? Pros and cons. All right, well, let's and if you have any other questions about the book, feel free to drop those in and we can circle back around to them, or questions about their group home model and long-term care solution. I know everybody's always full of questions about that. And we can address them if we have time for the end. Um, Now I want to switch gears a little bit and talk about the new documentary project we have in the works. Um, it all kind of fits together very nicely, which is kind of, I think, echoes how we got started with Unseen initially. I mean, we met you guys by just seeing like a Facebook post from a friend of a friend, and then it happened to be that you lived in our area and we could just meet up for lunch one day, which just always seemed like this crazy bit of serendipity. And then fast forward a couple years, Unseen is out. We on our end, we're kind of managing the distribution and impact process or phase where we've been doing screenings with organizations all over the country, from children's hospitals to major corporations like Intel, Verizon, Google, bringing it to their companies, government agencies doing trainings. I mean, really just so happy to see how well it's been embraced by organizations who want to bring this message and have these conversations in their community. We managed PBS broadcast where it was, broadcast on hundreds of stations nationwide on public television. So everything really just plodding along nicely. And we were, not really with any specific intentions on doing a follow-up or any kind of next step, but we were introduced to, surprisingly, two comedians who, through a mutual connection, who have who have both have interesting stories about planning for the future care of their loved one. So one of them, Graham Kay, he has a brother who has autism and is he lives independently but is supported by his parents and kind of his day-to-day living and a couple other organizations in Canada. And then Kirk Smith, who has a son who also has profound autism, and he currently lives in Sweden. It's kind of a long story of how that's possible, but we can get into that. But he's in a um, group home setting in Sweden where he does get great care. But of course, Kirk is kind of really feels a lot of guilt and pressure of being separated from his son and how it's difficult he visits as much as he can, but it's difficult to get back and forth. So they're both kind of looking to the future, like, is this gonna work? Graham's saying, what's gonna happen when um my parents can't do the daily care anymore? Do I have to move back to Canada and do that? Kirk's saying, is this our long-term solution? My son's not around any of his other family. He doesn't get a lot of visitors. They're both kind of asking these same questions that you guys were, looking ahead and really just not knowing what's coming down the pike. Um, and so we met with them. We were obviously intrigued by the fact that they're comedians, so they have kind of an interesting life that's very different from most of us. They're at comedy clubs, traveling around the country, around the world, but then also managing this very real, day-to-day practical thing that caregivers and family members of these individuals have to think about. So we're immediately intrigued, but we're kind of trying to find, like, all right, what's the tie-in here? How do we, are we just sharing their story? How do we talk about, what the answers are? Where does the story kind of go? And about this time, I think, Jess, you and I reconnected, and just I don't know why, but we were talking on a call like this about kind of where things were, and you said, I've been telling everyone at the home, like, this is that has their children in the same group home as Luke, that we need to make a documentary about this because the process has been so complex and ever changing, and there's been so many moving parts to it. We talked about making a documentary, um, and I said, "Now hold on,
I think I
where?"
said, are you interested?
Yeah,
Because I
yeah.
don't know of any other filmmakers. So do you want this project?
Yeah, and I was like, now wait a minute. I mean, obviously I knew you guys were working on that, but I didn't know that you had any interest in going, back to the to the documentary world, or that, I didn't know the details of what the experience had been like. So I was definitely intrigued, and the more we talked about it, I think it really felt like a perfect kind of continuation of, we Unseen followed your family at a certain time. And I think, toward the end of Unseen, it talks about that this being a concern that keeps you up at night. Like, what's the long-term plan when we can't do this day-to-day care anymore? What's going to happen? But it just kind of left it at that. It just left it as, that's a worry you have. It didn't give any next steps or what happens with that. So we really see this as kind of, you know, the next evolution. And the next. It's not going to be a part two necessarily, but it picks up where that left off. Do you think that's fair to say?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and it's just crazy how it all came together. Like, I mean, it's just meant to be, is how I feel with both of these creations, with Unseen and this next documentary. And I'm really excited for this next one. I mean, just even seeing the trailer, I think it's going to make a huge difference in the world of special needs families, and just that long-term care question that haunts every single parent, what happens to my child when I die or if I get sick, or that's the question that keeps parents up at night.
Yeah, and that's really what led us down this path was through working on Unseen, you know, the approach for that was kind of to bring up lots of the different issues that caregivers are experiencing. And I think early on with that process, we talked about, are we going to pick one issue or are we going to try to touch on a lot of them? And we went with the approach of, let's keep it broad and a more wide lens. And that allows organizations who host screenings and individuals to kind of talk, take different angles as they have discussions and talk about solutions as part of that. But even while we were having all these conversations with caregivers, the two things that kept coming up were lack of respite and how, if respite is available to you, that makes all the difference. That, there's a good chance you actually are in a good place as a caregiver if you can get consistent respite, or at least have it on the horizon to look forward to. And the second one was that long-term care question. Just that's what's on everybody's mind. How's that going to affect siblings if you don't have other children? What are the other options? And we just kept hearing it over and over and over, as something that just everybody's worried about. And so I think that's what really just crystallized for us. This was the right direction to go in. Um, and that, we heard that concern over and over. And we were introduced to these comedians dealing with this. And you guys are trying to solve the solution for your family as well, and we were already connected and kind of know a little bit about your story. So it just, yeah, same, I agree. It just felt like the stars kind of aligned to bring this together. Um, and that's how we got here. So we have, just to
Yeah.
give a little, oh, sorry, go.
No, I was just going to say, you and I have had numerous conversations too, as you've spoken with all these families nationwide. And I've been hearing from families for years and years too. And it is that respite and that long-term care solution. Like, what does that look like for my loved one? And we've even had conversations saying, I think most parents can even wrap their minds around like raising their child till they're 18, 19, 20. And even if it's a difficult road that they have to walk with their child, it's like, well, this is my child, I'll hunker down, I'll get it done. But then, yeah, as kids are graduating and going off to college and getting married, and you're still there, like full time raising your child as your child's 20, 21, 22, and you're getting older and your body hurts more. And I think that was the issue that like rose to the surface. Like, this is the issue that has to be addressed here in the United States, because as we've talked to, like, there is a tsunami of individuals coming up in the next couple of years with disabilities that are going to need long-term housing solutions, and their aging caregivers are just going to continue to get older and weaker and not able to care for these individuals. And if we don't start to address this as a nation, I don't know what this looks like in terms of mental health and I'm not sure what all the repercussions are for something like this. So I think this documentary is coming at just the right time, and I hope it just does amazing things in the world.
Yeah, and I feel like it's not even always that caregivers, it's not even that they don't want to do the caregiving role. I think some are would be okay with that. It's that you physically are going to get to a point where you can't, where, especially if the daily care includes lifting or moving or, challenging behavior, things like that, that you just physically can't, as you get older, can't do anymore. Or you get your own illness or, have your own physical mental health challenges, like it, or, parents pass away and can't do it. Like there's an end in sight that so many caregivers are going to face, and trying to plan for that, but looking around and seeing we really don't have, your options are a facility where you don't feel confident about the quality of care or the safety or
Options, Amanda, there aren't options. Like,
yeah, I mean,
there's
I guess you could say they
nothing.
don't even count as options because you,
When we
you don't
moved
feel
back to
like
Michigan too, we kind of thought there were group homes that Luke would even be eligible for. There's nothing. There are no options. And we were told the only way really he gets bumped to the top of the list is if something happens to you or your husband. Then he's bumped to the top of the list, and who knows, he might go to the UP 5 hours away from you. So then you're uprooting your child from the only life he's ever known. He just experienced a devastating loss with, the loss of me or his father, and he goes and lives up in the UP, away from his entire community and everybody who loves him. And it's like, that's not an option. Like, that's, And I know most states, like there are no options. There's nothing available. So yeah, addressing that. I mean, that's the problem.
Hmm. Yeah. Well, you want to watch the trailer?
Yeah, let's do
How
that.
does that sound? I think that would be a good intro to just kind of give everybody um, a quick look at kind of what we have started, and then we can talk a little bit more about the content.
I think it's really interesting that in our Declaration of Independence, we said that all people are created equal. It said all people are created equal.
When you get to the housing needs of an adult, the most vulnerable, intellectually disabled, all of a sudden now inclusion isn't considered. It's too much, it's too hard, there's not enough money.
Complication is he lives in Sweden where he gets great care, and I live in America where the care is not free and is not going to be as good. I can't pay for the kind of care he gets.
Although our kids are very, very different in many ways and the needs are different, we have one thing in common. They have to live someplace when we're too old to take care of them or when we're no longer here. There's not enough support. The biggest challenge is getting adequate levels of support.
I don't know what to do. We don't know what the answers are.
Now for something completely different. One time at McDonald's, this lady's staring at me. Like, I know this lady, like she's seen me on TV, what's happening? I look down, right in the middle of her 3 kids is my son just eating all their food. Saved me $7. I have a lot of guilt issues surrounding the fact that he's 2,500 miles away at any time. He's alone. Yeah, that's the hard one.
He wakes me up every morning and we do like a Bert and Ernie impression.
How's it going, Ernie? Gucci goo.
I thought we were doing an interview.
We are doing it. He's filming right now.
Oh,
He's making a movie about you and me.
that's good.
He lives alone in semi-assisted living. My parents bought him his own apartment. I'm a comedian who lives in New York. I had roommates until I was in my mid-30s. I'd be on the phone with my brother, and he'd hear my roommates in the background and be like, Graham, why do you have roommates?
My parents don't want to have me give up my career and move back to Canada. They don't think that I will have to, but I think I might.
If we don't address it, it'll continue to place strains on our system in places that can't handle it.
We just could not come up with what we needed for him. Why don't we take matters into our own hands and try to move forward in creating a solution for him?
It's more than one person can handle. How do you keep a job? So now I'm unemployed, now you have 2 problems. How does that fix it?
It's a huge problem, and it keeps getting bigger and bigger.
We have to sort of ask ourselves, is it important to us? Well, how are we going to help these folks, and is it important for us as a society to do this thing?
I've got my fears about the future. Does he have any fears about his own future or what's going to happen?
She needs to be valued and seen, and she isn't.
Maybe it's my duty. It's just my duty to take care of him. To go up there and take care of him. And I don't know.
Cheese. Okay. Go back.
Wait, one more.
All right. What do you think? Give us your feedback in the chat if you'd like to share. And just I thought this might be a good time to talk about the title that we went around and around with. We were so you can see now, some of you asked that the title is Uncertain. And I feel great about it now. That's always if you've ever had to name a book or a film or something, it's the biggest question. It's so hard and feels like so much is riding on it. So we went round and round with it. I do feel like Uncertain, it is very fitting, given that, the last words of the trailer are, I don't know. Like, and that's just the question people talk about, uncertain future. People just feel like they really have, the options are uncertain, the outcomes uncertain. I think it really just kind of encapsulates it in one word nicely. You were a fan of that one, right, Jess?
Yeah, I was not a fan of the original one. And I told you many times.
I know. It was always a working title, but I'll tell you what, the working title, I liked was Comedy of Carers, playing on the comedy of errors, but with caregivers. You get it. It's clever. But
I get
we
it.
did.
I just there's so little that's humorous when it comes to like this topic. I think that's what was so hard for me. Like it is a heavy topic and it weighs so heavily on parent caregivers' minds. Like, and that word comedy just I couldn't like wrap my mind around that word.
Yeah, well, and I was actually taking kind of a different approach, thinking like there is a comedy element to it because of the comedians being a part of
Right.
it. And it's a play on comedy of errors, which could be a descriptor of the current situation. It's just laughable how woefully inadequate it is. And what the comedians talked to us about a lot was that, they're like, they totally they have that heaviness on them as well. They totally feel the weight of the future and the uncertainty. And their coping mechanism is comedy and bringing, taking that, if you can't, we have to laugh so we don't cry, like that kind of thing. I think you said at one point, you're like, comedians, how is that gonna, how does that tie into this? Do you remember your question marks there?
Yeah, a little bit. I think it was more about the title. I
Uh,
totally understand how comedians tie into this, especially with their stories. They're such powerful stories. But you landed on the right title. It's the right title.
Yeah, no, that's why we have working titles. I did little mini focus groups where I would say it to people, and I still maintain that if we were in the UK, that would be the perfect title because they say carers instead of caregivers, and I think it'd be a lot more familiar. But alas, we
Yeah.
are here in the US, so we'll stick with uncertain. But yeah, I'm excited about the comedy angle, and I think you kind of got a sense from the trailer, like we're kind of weaving back and forth between that, like, these really heavy questions and feelings that are weighing on families, and then the comedians doing a set where they're talking about their family and their challenges, and that's something they do really well, is kind of weave in and out of that seriousness, but giving you a laugh to break it up. So I think that our goal here is that the comedians kind of bring that like intrigue to it and some entertainment value, where folks who maybe this isn't their personal story will say like, oh, that sounds interesting, I've heard of these comedians before, or I like comedy, let me see what this is about. And you're kind of you're drawn in with that. But then it gives us a platform to also talk about these very real, very serious concerns with the gravity that they deserve. So I think that's going to be our challenge as the filmmakers, is kind of weaving between those two sides of it.
Yeah, I agree. Can everyone still see us? Somebody commented we can no longer see you.
Let us know. I think I turned off the sharing. Okay. Looks like they can see us. Cool.
Okay.
All
Okay,
right.
good.
So, yeah, so I'll give a little update on kind of where we are. I worried that when we kind of started announcing it and we have the trailer, that we gave the impression that we're done with it and it's ready to go. Let me just, for the record, be clear. We are still at the very, very beginning stages. We just kind of self-funded a handful of production days so that we could get enough together to test the concept, do some initial interviews, get some feedback, and start being able to circulate this idea for the film. But we are still very much early on. And it was easy to go film with the Ronne family at Hope Farm and whatnot, because you guys kind of know the process, and said like, yeah, just come on and do it, and we'll see how it goes. So we've done a handful of those production days, but we still have a long way to go. We still don't have, I mean, we have, we're connected with several families, the comedians, the Ronnies, a few more that show the challenges that are, indicative of, represent what families are dealing with. But we haven't gotten to the part where we're talking to people who are working on solutions in this area. So, who are coming up with solutions or looking to change legislation that's impacting it, or coming up with private market solutions that could have an impact. So that's actually a place I would ask for y'all's help if you're in this situation currently, if you've been exploring it at all, we are totally looking for feedback and input. So if you want to go to the website for the film, it's uncertaindoc.com. If you go to the Get Involved tab, there's a link to a form on there, which is pretty much just a bunch of open fields where you can tell us about your experience. Tell us if you know of a company or organization that is working in this area that we should talk to, or somebody who's a thought leader in this field talking about changes and what needs to happen. So we're still totally taking input, looking for kind of where we go next to tell this story in a very complete and comprehensive way. So we'd be really grateful for your feedback there if you have some input to add. Let's talk a little bit about how we think, what do you think we're going to bring from that was successful about Unseen to this film? What's your initial thoughts? We talked about kind of how it's different with the comedy angle, but how is it the same?
Yeah, I think this film is a little bit lighter. I mean, you get that sense already, but I do believe, just knowing Tom and you, I mean, the emotion will be there, and you'll continue to try to elicit tears out of me and everybody else you encounter.
Not forced tears, just natural.
Not forced tears,
Yeah.
no. But the questions tend to lead to some very emotional answers. And it's an emotional topic. So did you say differences or similarities? I think I kind of touched on.
Yeah, I think the similarities, I think I'm interested in bringing through or what I feel like has made Unseen successful, and why so many caregivers have been drawn to it, is that authenticity that you guys and all the other people who gave us their testimonials were willing to be really open, really vulnerable, and just kind of put it all out there and say, like,
yeah,
I don't always feel like I can say this out loud, but I'm going to put it out there because I know that others are feeling it and are scared to say anything. And if we all keep not saying anything, then nothing's going to get solved.
Right.
So I think that was the key to Unseen really being relatable to so many people. And so that's what I want to make sure comes through in this new project is, giving families a platform to really talk about, how serious this is to them and what it looks like if we don't solve it, and how scary that is.
And I think Unseen, we had some people suggest that it kind of left a hopeless feeling at the end. And I think Uncertain is going to try to wrap that up a little bit, and offer, yes, this is a big issue, and we do need to start to address it. But there are people making changes. There are people, taking the bull by the horns and creating solutions for their loved ones. And there are options. And hopefully bringing it to the forefront will increase that awareness nationwide too, and bring that change that we do so desperately need. We need more housing opportunities for our loved ones. And they need to be safe. And, I don't know if you're going to dive into this part of the issue too, but the direct care staffing crisis, that's huge, to pay these staff workers a living wage. I mean, that is rare. We do provide that at Hope Farm, which has been such an encouragement, because we've been able to keep and retain such good staff because we pay them so well. And that was a number one request of all the families. And we're so grateful that our home care director agreed to that. But there are so many more issues than just providing the building that our loved one is going to live in. We're going to have to go deep and talk about the direct care staffing shortage and the living wage issue and all the issues surrounding home health care companies and how few there are out there. Do you plan to address those issues as well in this film?
Yeah, definitely. And one of the experts we have talked to already, he kind of suggested this idea of a three-legged stool concept, like that this challenge all kind of revolves around three pieces. One of them being housing. So just having the physical spaces, whether that's apartments, homes, group facilities, just having physical places for people to live we have housing supply issues across the country. And so that comes into play here. The second one being care workers. So you can have the physical space, but if we're talking about people that need daily to or weekly or 24/7 support, that takes a lot of people, direct care workers to fill that need. So that's a huge piece of it. And that's where like making sure they're being paid fair wages, that they actually have a career path, that it's a desirable job. And I think a lot of that goes back to just how we view the role of care as a country, which I think we could all agree is generally pretty poorly. We don't prioritize it. We don't view it as an esteemable career path that deserves high pay and takes a lot of skill. And that's something that needs to shift, at that base level. And then the third leg of that stool is equipping individuals for independence. And I thought that was kind of an interesting take on it too, is in kind of what you alluded to at the beginning. You as the parents and caregivers had to come around to the idea that Luke was going to live independently or, have a higher level of independence and be willing to make that transition, even though it was hard for everyone. So I think that was interesting. I hadn't really considered that angle of it too, that it's not just about the workers and the houses, it's parents kind of coming.
Absolutely. I mean, because when you've been doing it for so long too, it becomes your identity. And I'm kind of floundering even now because that's gone. Like, who am I? I'm not a caregiver anymore, but I think it's just being brave too. And it's, being the bison and turning around and facing your storm. It's like you don't want to hinder your child's growth or your young adult's growth either. And I knew it was the best for Luke to get out of our basement, watching Veggie Tales, and to go learn some of these skills and to get out from under his mother's constant care and control, and to become independent. And it is best for him and it's best for me. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there are a lot of parents who really struggle, and I would say especially mothers, because I think statistically mothers take on 70% of the care. Am I quoting that correctly?
I don't know if I know the number, but I would believe that number.
Okay, I think it's around 70%. And it becomes your identity. You give up your job, you give up your hobbies, you give up your friends, you give up everything to care for this child, and to release that identity is terrifying. So I'm really glad that you're addressing that too, because that is a big part of the problem.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that was a really helpful concept for me to think of it as kind of that three-piece idea. And our plan will be for the film to kind of tackle each one of those, because we can't solving any one of them is great, but on its own is not going to be enough. And I think you've experienced that with just setting up the home you've been working on. You could have the house, but if you didn't have the workers, then nothing really changed. And I think you did deal with some parents who, were thinking about it, but ultimately decided they weren't ready for their adult child to move in. And so there's just so many moving parts to it that we really have to make sure we take that full picture. And going back a little bit, I think I'm sure this group is really familiar with, there's horrific things that have happened in our country's past that come to institutions and group care settings. And thankfully, a lot of that has been eradicated and dealt with. And we, kind of moved to this model of community-based care and, individual solutions. But we eliminated a lot of options in the process and haven't fully brought back enough options in replacement of them. So we want to also take that historical look at how did we get here, because that can inform where we go. So we want to look back a little bit, talk to some experts about, the issues that the current system was trying to correct for, and rightly so. But figure out how we do that in a way that doesn't limit families' options and lets everyone find the solution that is the best for their family and the individuals that they're taking care of. So yeah, a lot to cover, just a little intimidating, but one step at a time.
Right. And that's, so specific to each family too. I mean, we ran into issues with, the autonomy thing. Well, Luke had to have autonomy over every aspect of his life, living at Hope Farm. And it's kind of like, well, we've been told psychologically he's at an 18-month-old level. I don't know that somebody who functions at an 18-month-old level, and there's, who knows what exactly he functions at. But and you and I have discussed this too. I don't know that somebody at that level should be able to walk out the door and into the street. I don't know that he should have the autonomy to do that. That's not safe for him. So addressing some of these rules that are in place too, like autonomy over safety, that makes sense for some individuals, but it doesn't make sense for all individuals. And I think, that's a struggle with a lot of these group homes is your child has to, it's like a one size fits all model, and we can't operate that way. It has to be so individualized with each young adult or adult in order for it to work appropriately and be safe for everybody involved.
Yeah, I think that's what we, after talking to, a handful of experts in this area, that does seem like it really keeps coming back to that any solutions are going to have to be very individualized and look at, it isn't one size fits all, because everybody's situation is different. Every person needs different things to thrive, and every family has different desires for what they feel like is the best fit for their family. Yeah, and these kind of one size fits all, everybody has to follow these rules, really leaves a lot of people, not in the best situation. So I think that's one thing we want to take a look at with the film too, is what does it mean to create individualized solutions that are person centered and focus on creating the most independence and the most safety and the best quality of life for everyone involved. And I think that's a tall order, but I think we have what it takes to, as a country, to do it. We just have to get the will behind it. And the goal is that a film like this will be a first step in just bringing it to people's attention. Obviously the caregiver community is very intimately familiar with this challenge. But it's not necessarily something that is dinner table conversation for everybody if it's not your story. So we want to use this as
right. No, most people would rather not address it because then they, might have to do something about it. So nobody's like lining up to talk about this subject.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so easy if you're not the one having to make these decisions to just kind of put it off. But you can see from the scale of it, as more and more people are getting to this point, we're having housing shortages, we have care worker shortages, and that's going to start leaking into the areas that affect everyone, in the economy and housing and healthcare, whether this is your specific story or not. So it behooves all of us to start taking a look at it and trying to figure out what these solutions are. And I think that, as one of the quotes in the film just said, we have to decide as a society, are we the kind of country and society that's going to take care of folks that need it, or are we just going to look the other way and say, good luck, figure it out?
Well, it goes back to what you were talking about before we knew we were live about Japan, how they take care of their residents. Everybody, it's not very individualized. It's more about the community as a whole. And yeah, are we going to care for the community as a whole, or are we going to stay inwardly focused and just focus on ourselves?
Yeah, and say, if it's not my problem, then
right.
It's not my thing to think about.
Not my problem. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Anybody have any other questions? I think we've kind of just been trying to address them as we went along, but we have a couple more minutes if you want to pop one. If you could put it in the QA box, that's a little easier for me to see. It doesn't get lost in the chat. But I think we can do our book giveaway. Ashley, did you have a chance to pull some names out of the hat?
Yes, we do. We have some winners. Okay, we can also put these in the chat, but our 3 winners are Gwendolyn Harshaw, Catherine Donald, and Elizabeth Saucedo.
Yay! Congratulations. I should have your email addresses, so I'll follow up with you and we'll get in touch with how to ship those to you. So that will be exciting. And then you can leave a review on Amazon for Jess and help the book get to the very top of the list. We'd appreciate that.
Please leave a review.
Yeah. And so my last ask is, like I mentioned, we're still at the very beginning of the film. If you feel like this, you see our vision, you see where we're trying to go with this, and want to bring it to life, we are going to be in a little bit of a holding pattern until we raise more funds to cover production, travel, editing, all these many expenses that go into making something like this. So if you're in a position where you could make a donation, or you know somebody that could, or an organization that might be interested in supporting, we would be so grateful for that contribution or that connection. If you go to the doc website at uncertaindoc.com, there's more information. We have some little perks. If you're one of our early donors, you can get free access to when we do our first screening, which will be a little bit in the future, but you'll be in the first group to premiere the film when it comes out. And then you can also get your name in the credits as a donor that made the film possible. So just some fun little perks if you're able to donate. No pressure, of course, but that is critical to making this happen. It takes so many moving parts to bring these things to life. So we really appreciate your support there. So uncertaindoc.com has all the information. And also with it being National Family Caregivers Month, we're doing some free screenings of the Unseen film every weekend in November. If you haven't seen it yet, or if you wanted someone in your life to watch it, this is the perfect time to get them to do it, because it couldn't be easier. They can just go on and watch it anytime during the weekends in November. Send them the link to that one's caregiverdoc.com/NOV for November. And I think we'll put that one in the chat so you have it. So share that. We're having some other discussions with a couple different organizations and experts in their field about reclaiming your joy as a caregiver, building community, and faith and caregiving. So all hot topics that I know a lot of you guys would be interested in. So please check out that website and join some of those discussions as well. All right, Jess, anything else you want to add?
I just popped a comment in the chat. Somebody said something about a virtual book launch. I am doing a virtual book launch party. I am collecting individuals, gathering individuals,
building a team,
building a team to help me launch this book out into the world. If you're interested in being a part of that, there have been some posts on my Facebook page, Jess Ronne Official. I changed it from Jess plus some S. I thought it was time to grow up a little bit. So I have a more grown-up name now. Or send a message to info@thelucasproject.org, and I will send over that link for you to join that virtual book launch team.
Perfect. All right. Thank you all so much for joining. We really appreciate your time and look forward to connecting more on the future of both the book and the documentary.
Yep.
Thank you all.
Good. Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.